so good to be joined in the studio and via Zoom. The final panel discussion on the topic of the Treaty of Waitangi. We've had a couple of these on consecutive Fridays, but wrapping it up this morning, we've got a conversation on Facebook at the moment asking the question, how can we uphold the treaty going forward, and what does that mean? What does that look like? Thank you for your thoughts and comments on that. We'll take a look at that later in the program. I have quite an illustrious panel today, and I'll ask each of you to introduce yourself as is appropriate to your title and background and area of expertise. Dave Moko, if we could start with you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Andrew. I live in Māngere at the moment here with my family. Mm-hmm. I have been involved in Christian ministry for a number of years, but I'm retired now.
Yep. And
so find myself in all sorts of places, on boards around the country and on our local board there in Māngere too, a neighbourhood board. Yes, I have a wife, 3 adult daughters, 2 son-in-laws and 5 grandchildren. And we all live in the Papakainga there in Māngere.
Very good indeed. Thank you for being on the program. Alistair Reese. Alistair, kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Kia ora, Andrew, and to all the other panellists as well. Ko Alistair Reese, taku ingoa e whanau mai ai ki Kirikiri Roa. So I was born in Hamilton, but I now live in the district of Tapuika at Paengaroa o ngā Marakumra o Marukukuri. Marukukuri is behind me there, the big, the red po that you'll see at the end of the Eastern Highway corridor as you enter into the township of Paengaroa. And I live on our farm orchard with my wife, Jeannie, who's from Canada, and my daughter, Naomi Reese Nicholas, lives down the road with her husband, Koro Nicholas, and our new Moko Akaripa. So tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Malcolm, welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you, Andrew. So Malcolm Falloon, I have been an Anglican minister for over 30 years now, mainly in the South Island, but I currently pastor a church here in Auckland, and but also involved with the New Zealand Christian Network, trying to build Christian unity amongst churches. And in the recent past, anyway, I've done a particular study on Māori engagement with Christianity and the way that early Māori converts embraced the gospel. So that's been a passion of mine.
Kia ora, welcome. And last but not least, Manuel Beazley, kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Andrew, o tēnā tātou katoa, tēnā koutou e whakarongo mai nā, e mātakitaki mai nā, I runga I te purangi, tēnei uri o hokianga whakapau karakia, e whakapāho atu nei kia koutou, ko Manuel Beazley a hau, mai ngā taha e rua o te hokianga, mai te taha raki, ko ngai tūpoto ki motu kraka te hapu, mai te taha tonga, ko Ngāti Kaharau, Ngāti Hau ki o Manaia. No reira tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Manuel Beazley from the Hokianga. That's where my whānau connect into. Currently I live in Auckland, and I am, the title of my role is the Vicar for Māori, or the Episcopal Vicar for Māori for the Catholic Diocese of Auckland. And that's a role that represents the Bishop, the Catholic Bishop of Auckland through our rohe, through our diocese. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you so much. Now, starting the conversation as we've started each of the panel discussions, asking each of you to say, in your own words, what the treaty means to you. Dave, we'll start with you. What does Te Tiriti mean to you?
It goes back a long way for me. When I first started to understand the Treaty of Waitangi, it was as a protester back in the late 70s. And over the years, it has changed somewhat for me to being how I see it now as meaning it's a collaborative effect for us in terms of how we can live together. Mm-hmm. Understanding that there is difference in our country, but that difference doesn't have to separate us. And so the treaty for me now gives me place to be in Aotearoa, New Zealand, as well as everybody else.
Alistair, your comments on this, and also what the treaty means to you and what you think the importance is for us as a nation of Te Tiriti.
I'll write the book right now for you if you want.
I think you have written the book, Alistair, but if we could just do the précis, that would be appreciated.
To give an answer to that deep question, so first of all, I see it as a providential gift to the nation obviously coming down from heaven, and then facilitated through the hospitality of Te Iwi Māori to all the new settlers that came into the land, and providing a just entrance for tauiwi to this land. So it's a mechanism that helps two peoples to live together as one.
Yep.
That's a wider framework, but on a personal framework, it provides for me part of my identity. So I identify as tanga Te Tiriti, and it gives to me a place to stand, or a tūranga waiwai. So it's a very important personal component to my identity in this land. And it's an opportunity for all of us who live in the motu to be able to find out ways that we can live together in harmony.
Thank you for that summary, and I would encourage people to read the more extensive descriptions that you've written on this topic, Alistair. Malcolm, your thoughts on what the treaty means to you?
Well, for me, it's a primary thanksgiving.
Okay.
Thanksgiving for all that has been achieved in New Zealand, really, through the signing of the treaty and the foresight of those who put their signatures to that document. But also thanksgiving for the way in which the gospel provided the soil in which that treaty could take root,
Yep.
and the way that the gospel is a glue there. So as a New Zealand Christian, I look at it and I see how much of it shows the way the gospel shaped our country. But also, like David and Alistair have said, I think that thanksgiving for the friendships that have developed through treaty partnerships, where Maori offer what the good things of their culture, and as a Pākehā, we offer what's good in our culture, and together we shape something, I think, forged in a friendship. And I think that's been a feature of New Zealand right through. It may not appear that way, but I think friendship has been a feature of the relationship in New Zealand from the very beginning.
Certainly a lot more conciliatory and friendly in this room, and I know this is something which people have some strong opinions on. Manuel, though, wrapping up this round, what does the treaty mean to you?
I am a direct descendant of a signatory to Te Tiriti of Waitangi. My tupuna, Hua, from Ngai Tūpoto, signed Te Tiriti of Waitangi on the 12th of February at Māngungu. And that was the biggest occasion of collection of signatories in the whole process of getting Te Tiriti of Waitangi signed. So I have quite an intimate connection to Te Tiriti because of the fact that my tupuna has his tohu on the document, and so for me personally, a couple of things around what it means to me. One, it's that tupuna connection, but it's also an affirmation and an acknowledgement of my existence in a sense. So Te Tiriti o Waitangi really confirms that Māori existed as a people,
yeah.
And the fact that the British Crown wanted to enter into Te Tiriti is an affirmation of Māori existence. And the next thing I'd say is that for me it's a promise of hope. Mm-hmm. Te Tiriti o Waitangi represents that promise of a better future. Everyone who signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi, even if they were perhaps against signing it, they'd signed so for a reason. They signed so because they could see that there was something in it for them. Mm-hmm. Even if they had other thoughts about what it might be, they signed with the expectation that something good could come out of this. So that always for me is foundational, is that Te Tiriti o Waitangi doesn't just lock us into an 1840 Aotearoa. It was the promise of a better future and the platform by which we can launch into that better future. Now, as we know our history, that we've had some good gains, but there's also been times when that future, that hopeful future, hasn't been really expressed and lived out. But I'm always hopeful through Te Tiriti o Waitangi that we can come to that point where everyone in Aotearoa can live the life that they want to live, that they can prosper.
I salute your hope and optimism on that one. And just to reinforce, there's quite a conciliatory mood in the room. But of course, with the hikoi last week, there are some people in New Zealand with some strong and varied opinions on what Te Tiriti means and what it should mean for us as a nation. General question, whoever wants this one, Do you think that the differences on how we see Te Tiriti are the divisions too deep, or are they reconcilable?
I think one of the sort of underlying things when we speak about Te Tiriti and we express it as a bicultural relationship, I don't think that helps us in 2024, the term bicultural, because invariably when you hear the word bicultural, you think of two cultures, and then that gets reduced to being about Māori and Pākehā. And if I'm neither of those, then this has got nothing to do with me. I mean, that's often the perception that I get when I'm talking with people. But in actual fact, I mean, we do have a bicultural relationship, but that bicultural relationship is based on two sovereign entities, two sovereign peoples coming together, so Māori and the Crown. And it just so happened that everyone on the Māori side of the equation in 1840 was ethnically Māori, and everyone on the Crown side of the relationship in 1840 was ethnically British. But now in 2024, we still have that Māori-Crown relationship, and Māori are still ethnically Māori, but the Crown side of the relationship now looks ethnically diverse.
Wanting to jump into these changing definitions and how particularly terms for Crown and Māori have perhaps changed over the years. But before we jump into that, anybody else on the hope that Manuel is bringing us?
Well, I see, there's certainly a diversity amongst the kind of the Crown side of the treaty, but also looking at the current debate, I see it as Māori discussing themselves. I see Māori in the ACT Party. I see Māori in New Zealand First. I see Māori in National debating with Māori in Labour and Te Pāti Māori over what the significance of the treaty for the future. And I think that's a very healthy debate to have.
I mean, the debate is good, but are we too divided, do you think?
So I don't think it naturally just divides between Māori and Pākehā.
Okay.
I think that's a debate that all sections of our society are having. And so to cast it as simply a Māori versus Pākehā debate, I think is too simplistic in my view. But I think at its heart, it is a spiritual issue. And for me, we're reaping 80 years of a secular history of, or attempt to have a secular history of New Zealand, which writes out religion from our past. And as such, I don't think a secular view of our history is actually able to hold us together. And so I see that we're trying to rediscover actually what does it mean to be one people? What does that spiritually mean? And I think for people at signing the treaty, it really was coming under the rangatiratanga and the kawangatanga of Christ. And as we have eroded that spiritual dimension of the rule of Christ and in New Zealand, I think we're now struggling to find cohesion. And so, yes, it's quite a deep problem, but it's Christ's problem. So it's a gospel problem. That's how I see it.
I mean, I think the hikoi really showed a sort of a unity of ideas and thought. And it wasn't just all Māori that were in the hikoi. There were a number of other ethnicities too. I think, when you look at our history, you don't have to go that far when you see the several sort of marches that went on. I think they all generated a sense of unity towards a particular cause, and this hikoi, this cause was, of course, to oppose the Principal Bill.
I'd like to refer back to your former question about reconciliation for a minute, Andrew, just because, in my view, the treaty is at its core a reconciliatory document. So you asked the question, can we have hope for reconciliation? I'd like to enlarge the scope of that question in the answer that Colossians tells us that Christ has reconciled the cosmos. And so it seems to me a potential there for all of humanity to actually to walk inside of a reconciliation process, and then ultimately some aspect of the manifestation of the kingdom of God in a reconciliatory state. But the treaty is the mechanism in terms of what we have politically to be able to work that out. And the same way that we have in terms of our marriage covenants, those covenants that we have that facilitate ways in which two partners can work out their relationship. I'll finish on this by saying I used used to think that the treaty was an absolute that would never go away, a little bit like Moana Jackson said. He said it's a mountain that will never disappear.
Yeah.
But I've come to understand now, Andrew, that actually the treaty is a very fragile thing. And we need to understand its fragility. And in the same way that a marriage is, if a marriage endures vitriolic occurrences for too long, even though we try to keep the marriage together, there could be ultimately a place where a marriage can dissolve, and it legitimately does so. And I think the same thing with the covenant of the treaty. So kia tūpato, the way that we need to handle this fragile gift within our midst.
Loving that and wanting to lean into that marriage metaphor, because I mean this is a covenant relationship that we're talking about. We don't want to get too far down into that metaphor, but specifically about, hey, when two people get married, they have the best of intentions, they're signing an agreement, but the details of what that agreement looks like, that gets worked out over time. That gets worked out when bad stuff happens. That gets worked out when one party does something wrong and the other needs to offer forgiveness. What a marriage ends up being is different than what it necessarily said in the wedding vows. Dave, your thoughts on this one, the changing meaning of Te Tiriti, what it meant back in the day compared to perhaps the best way of looking at it now. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think nothing fundamentally changes in terms of the Treaty of Waitangi for me. But the reality is, you know, we all got to live in this world collectively, and maybe I can try to answer this question by just giving an example of this morning.
Yep.
So every morning I go for coffee with a group of men in Mangere Bridge, and you know, we spend a number of hours together just talking. Most of them are not Christians, and so I asked them this morning. I said, so. We've just had the hikoi. I'll be keen to understand your fellows' reflection.
Yep.
And so, you know, we have Pacific Islanders, we have Māori or Pākehā, or a number of Pākehās, and then and so I just asked this question, and the responses were all very different,
Yeah.
you know, which is understandable. And so I think that although the Pākehā fella said, when I asked the question, the Pākehā fella said, I want to know what the contract is. Before I answer this question.
Yeah.
And I think, and we all laughed, you know, we know that he was being facetious, but in reality, I think that's always the view that many Pākehā have, is I want to know the detail in this conversation, in this relationship or friendships that we have there together, you know. And so I find that that the treaty means so many different things for so many people.
Yeah.
You know, that's just the reality
Well,
of life.
like a marriage, I often say to couples getting married, there's no fine print here. It's an open-ended contract. You know, lawyers would not advise you to sign. It's whatever the future might bring, in sickness and in health, richer or poorer. And so in that sense, I think it is a sacred compact. And I think the first Waitangi Day, when it started, that was the vision, walking hand in hand.
Yeah.
Walking step by step into the future. You talked about the hope that the treaty has, and much of modern New Zealand has been shaped by the vision of the Sarapana Ngāta, the Frederick Bennetts, the James Carroll, the Tauhenere. Their vision is actually we're bearing the fruits of it, and I think that one of the tensions, I think, with the hikoi I see, and with the Treaty Principles Bill, is that the Treaty Principles Bill seems to be wanting to flatten out cultural distinctives. Actually, everything we've gained over the last almost 100 years to be flattened out in the language of rights. And I don't think that's helpful at all, because as a Christian, I worship a Jewish Messiah as my Lord and Saviour. I don't try to remove his Jewishness, and even though I come as a Gentile. And in the same way, I think that there's room in the gospel for us to acknowledge and recognise distinctions, whether you call that privilege or other things. It's a consequence of God's providence and our history. So, yeah.
I think I want to bring up the privilege one, because this is the thing where some people are getting stuck, and it does involve different interpretations. of what was said back in the day and what this means now, and concern about what is being described as two different systems of rule of law depending on ancestry. Some people would see it as problematic to say that the treaty offers a different set of rights and privileges for Māori than non-Māori. Manuel, your thoughts on that?
So Te Tiriti o Waitangi didn't give Māori any extra rights than what they already had.
Yep.
The only people that got new rights were the settlers. And so, when we look at it in that context and we reduce it to being about rights,
Yep.
we'll always fall foul of that because, that ideal really is problematic. But I think coming back to the marriage image, one of the symbols of the sacrament of marriage is the word that the couple give to each other, the word that they would be faithful, the word that they would be fruitful.
Yeah.
And I think in the same way with Te Tiriti o Waitangi, we tend to focus too much on the words. And many Māori would say that the meaning, the value of Te Tiriti o Waitangi is more than the sum total of its words. It's quite a simple document, very short,
Yep.
but it's more about the word that two peoples gave to each other in 1840, that they would work for the good of each other. And I think that's where we need to sort of really come back to the word that we gave to each other, that we would work for the good of the other.
Yeah, that good faith agreement, and perhaps that's what we need moving forward is, yes, have some discussion about our different interpretations and different views, but to have those discussions in good faith between the original signatories, I suppose.
I do think that the treaty was just as important for Māori as it was for Europeans. And I think this is when I read the Waitangi Tribunal reports, I think this is being missed. Well, it's recognised, but it's not the significance that I'll take. And that is that as two systems of law do not work within Māoridom as much as it does within the European settlers who came, who were without any law, they were lawless. And as Christians were coming, as Māori were coming to under the law of Christ. It's like a different tikanga, a different way of establishing that. And I think that Henry Williams is right to say that the treaty established one law, both human and divine. It doesn't privilege the crown as some absolute sovereignty, but actually all sovereignty stems from Christ and the law of Christ. And I think that became as an important underpinning for the unity that we have.
A phrase which has gained a little bit of, political connotations. Are we not all one people? Of course, originally said by Governor Hobson back on the 6th of February, 1840. He iwi tahi tātou. Alistair, your thoughts on that? Can we be one people under Te Tiriti?
Andrew, this is obviously, as you said, it's a contested term, he iwi tahi tātou, and it is something that needs some careful scrutiny. This is my view of it. This is a term that was gifted to Lieutenant Governor Hobson by Henry Williams to describe the covenantal arrangement that was formulated within the treaty, the bringing together of two autonomous peoples, not as an homogeneous whole, but as almost a heterogeneous unity. And those examples, as Christians, they're accessible to us in the scriptures. For example, and the Jew and the Gentile are again described as one, but they retain their autonomy. Within a marriage, we have the two people. Again, it's a covenantal unity, but they also retain their autonomy. I think that it's very easy to get into simplistic language here, but one of the things is, and I use again the scriptural understanding of the reference to the Jewish people and what I would call the specialness of the covenantal arrangement with God and the Jewish people, and the difference between that with Gentiles, or you could call them tauiwi. And so I think that's a helpful understanding for us, that specialness doesn't mean to say that one is better than another, but that there are some arrangements, both spiritually and politically, that facilitate a way forward. I just want to read to you one thing, Andrew, out of the Tiriti of Waitangi, and it's the preamble.
Yep.
And it says this, that Her Majesty Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, regarding with her royal favour the native chiefs and tribes of New Zealand, and anxious to protect their just rights and property. So, yes, there is a specialness that the Crown has entered into in the relationship with Te iwi Māori. And I love what Manuel says, that it's not giving them new rights, it's actually affirming the rights that they already have. And so I think if we step back from something of I would call it almost a sense of rejection as Pākehā in terms of the specialness, that we can actually see that it's not an uncommon arrangement in all kinds of areas to have a type of specialness. And I'll just conclude with this. We as tauiwi, we as Pākehā also have a specialness, as Manuel has rightly said. We received a specialness in our entry into this land. We were conferred the term tangata tiriti, and we were given special rights in a new land. Well, at least my ancestors were, and us following on from there.
With the recent hikoi, some of the banners talking for a call, well, some said kill the bill, others said honour the treaty. Manuel, from your point of view, what does that look like? What would it look like for us in Aotearoa, New Zealand, to honour Te Tiriti?
I think for me, going back to an earlier point that I made, that everyone who signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi had dreams and hopes that there was something better. And I think for me, honouring the treaty means that we all thrive.
Yep.
We all get to be who we want to be and to thrive here in this country. And if we can do that, we'll be the greatest country on earth, where we all thrive. For me, that's as simple as that. For me, honouring Te Tiriti o Waitangi means we all thrive here.
Anything to add on that point, what honouring Te Tiriti looks like?
Go, Malcolm.
I can ask another question.
Well,
if you like.
I think there's sometimes when we say honour the treaty, that is a contested term, because some are saying honour the treaty because sovereignty wasn't conceded. Others are saying honour the treaty because sovereignty was conceded.
Well, perhaps I'll ask a different question then, because there are different interpretations of what the treaty meant back in the day and how we should interpret that now. Who should decide what the treaty means for us now as a nation going forward? Is that a government? Is it a referenda? Is it the Waitangi Tribunal? Is it a combination of that? What's your thoughts on that one?
Well, I think that a parliament is one expression of that, but of course everyone must be involved in the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that some of the anxiety that people have expressed in the hikoi was that actually the parliament is not necessarily the most helpful way, and certainly referendum is not the most helpful way of deciding these issues. They must be decided, they must be worked out, but we need to be giving. There needs to be leaders, political leaders, giving more thought to it.
I mean, referenda certainly smells like democracy, but it's a bit of a blunt instrument, particularly when people are making decisions not necessarily based on accurate, well-researched information.
It opens the door
right?
to lobbying. It opens the door to propaganda and other things. That's a feature of our humanity, which I think it's an abdication of leadership, actually. And I think that we need to entrust leaders to actually sort through these difficult conversations.
The conversations are so important. And back to the relationship aspect on this one, Dave, and the importance of having a civil conversation like you and your friends around a coffee table at a cafe in Māngere Bridge. I mean, can we have that civil conversation? There's a lot of heat in this argument. Can we calm down and be open to hear the views of others?
Yeah, I think we can. I just feel like the church has been silent in this conversation.
Yeah.
When I talk to my friends again around the table, or the tepu we call, all of them, or the majority of them, are divorced. So when we talk about marriage to them, it doesn't, and the treaty being a covenant and all that sort of stuff, they go, oh yeah, but the reality is, life continues to try and live civilly, and for some of my friends, who they're on a journey, they want to know, well, what's the church have to say about honouring the treaty, and many of them, just conclude that that justice still isn't seen.
Yeah, perhaps that's a almost a better metaphor than marriage. And Alistair, you're talking about this beforehand. This is a fragile thing. Like often marriages go through really difficult times and some don't survive. Perhaps the metaphor here is this is a broken relationship. There is some hurt, there is some healing that's needed in this space. Any thoughts, Alistair, on that?
Well, like any relationship, Andrew, there needs to be an element of trust between the people before progress can be made. But to return to your original question, who gets to decide?
Yep.
I think theoretically we would say that, in my view, there were three signatories of the treaty, obviously Crown and Māori, but as I've proposed that the Church was also the third signatory as the main witness signatory at the multiple versions of the treaty around the Motu.
Yep.
And so that I think that whatever has to be come forward, it has to be between those three. But they obviously ultimately would arrange something that would facilitate everyone's involvement. And so my discussions actually with previously with Sir Geoffrey Palmer just recently, he suggested that a Royal Commission would be a good place to discuss this, because we both agreed that actually the Damocles sword that's been hung over the present discussions in Parliament with the referendum, etc., is not at all helpful for this discussion going forward. But finally, sorry, I want to say I really concur with your with the idea that it's a broken relationship at the moment, and we need prayer for the healing so that we can actually sit around the table and kanohi ki ta kanohi and discuss some of these deep things without actually hurting each other again.
Just before you jump in there, Malcolm, because for the church to be involved, I know that for some people that would go down pretty badly, that the church should have a say in what happens next for Māori because of some of the hurt that we've seen over the years, that for some people, and even with the Royal Commission on abuse and faith-based care, some people would see church as part of the problem, not part of the answer on this one. And even recently with the church leaders' open letter that some saw as shutting down debate on what Te Tiriti means, rather than saying, let's talk about let's have a corridor together. There would be people who would be against the church having the influence that it perhaps once had in society. Any thoughts and comments on that idea?
Well, the word trust has been used quite a lot. And I think there are certain people within the church community that the non-church will probably trust.
Yep.
And maybe those are the ones, those are the leaders, or those are the people. And some of these leaders are like mums.
Yeah.
Who may not necessarily be seen up front in terms of the church, but they understand what it means to live honestly or justly, with their neighbour or with even, their husband.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry for cutting you off.
We're all called to be, as Christians, to be peacemakers, and a peacemaker needs to be accepted by both sides. And it is a problem that the church has betrayed that trust. And all I'd comment would be that as we look to Christ, we can't, with the gospel, we can't rewrite the past.
Yep.
In the same way, we can't undo the broken relations of the past, but Christ can redeem the future. And I think this is the hopefulness that Manuel speaks of. And I think that's where the church can have a role, only as we point to Christ, not to ourselves as a church, that's for sure.
Now, we're coming into the final moments of this one. Manuel, your comments on the role that the church could play or should play, perhaps. What should the church's response be to the debate?
Well, I mean, the church is always called to have a prophetic voice in the world, and of course, in the debate around Te Tiriti, the church must always be the one that calls for justice, and to be able to work for justice as well. And so the church does have a role to play. But I do concede that there are people, there will be parts of our society that will have real issues with the church having a role, particularly with the breaches of trust through the church's history here in Aotearoa and around the world.
Where to next, do you think? I mean, Royal Commission, that's been an idea that's tabled. I'll certainly forward that idea to the Prime Minister, see what he thinks about that one. But what should be the next steps for people that are listening to this at the moment? Now, we've been on a hikoi for the last 3 weeks in some ways, looking at different viewpoints on this, looking at some of the contentious issues. For the people at home that are listening to this, what would your advice be on the next step that each one of us can take on our journey towards understanding the treaty and what it means for us as a nation? Alistair, can I start with you on that?
Yes, I think first of all we need to try and understand personally where are we up to on the journey. And I think it relates to the question that you raised before, what's the role of the church? So if we're addressing mainly church people in this corridor, I think that the church needs to facilitate, as you've been doing, discussions, wānanga. We need to go forward and go deeply. One of the things that's concerning me at the moment, Andrew, is the amongst Christians and the church is that we suddenly believe we're experts. We haven't been at the table for over 180 years, and now we're actually trying to run the conversation and say what Article 2 means, itamia, itamia. So I think there's some real humility that needs to take place, particularly for us as Pākehā within the church, and sit quietly within our spaces, discussing it, but then wait to be invited to the table, as it were, on the wider conversation, when our credibility hopefully rises a little bit.
Now we are down to just on a minute to go until news. Dave, do you want to bring us home on this one? On what we can take away from this? What can we take forward into the future?
Well, way back from when our tupuna, they've always just wanted the treaty to be honoured. In a way that is respectful for, the beginning of the relationship, the continuation of the relationship. So I think we can't go far away from that. Governments and successive governments have tried to do so many different things to try and steer the waka another way. But what our tupuna, and I think even if we as followers of Christ want to be honest about this, I mean, we need to somehow be a voice for the people who just want the treaty to be honoured.
Yeah. Guys, it's been a robust and thought-provoking conversation. Thank you all for your contributions, and hey, we continue on this journey, on this hikoi, although perhaps we need more of a hui or a wānanga than a hikoi on this one. But gentlemen, thank you so much for your thoughts and comments. Thank you for joining us today.
Kia ora.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.